餌の稼ぎ、悪くはないな。
あなたみたいな人を探してた。僕と結婚してほしい。
あらやだ、かわいい。
あの子から異常なほどの魔力が感じられます。
Imagine a world where your entire future is decided by a single blessing from God. Here, levels are real, monsters are everywhere, and the difference between an ordinary villager and a legendary hero can determine whether you live a peaceful life or walk straight into certain death. Most people in this world exist somewhere between level 1 and level 5, spending their lives farming fields, running shops, raising families, and helping their towns survive. For them, the dangerous world outside the safety of civilization is something they are never meant to experience. But there is one rule that makes this world especially fascinating. Defeating monsters can bring enormous wealth. The problem is that only certain people are considered capable of doing it. Human society is divided according to roles that are anointed by God. There are 8 recognized roles that allow people to legitimately pursue monster hunting: warrior, fighter, cleric, magician, rogue, merchant, hunter, and sorcerer. Each role carries its own abilities and limitations, and the role someone receives can completely determine the direction of their life. If you are blessed with a powerful combat-oriented role, you may have the opportunity to become strong, wealthy, and respected. If you receive a role considered weak, however, your possibilities become dramatically smaller. And among all these roles, there is one that society considers almost completely powerless: villager. The villagers are not legendary warriors, magical prodigies, or fearless adventurers. They are the ordinary people who build and maintain the towns where everyone else lives. They cultivate crops, operate stores, create tools, raise livestock, and perform the countless everyday tasks necessary to keep civilization functioning. In a strange way, the people with the weakest role are responsible for creating the foundation upon which everyone else depends. Yet because they lack the abilities associated with monster hunting, they are treated as though their lives have little connection to the dangerous world beyond the town. For a villager, entering a monster-infested area is practically equivalent to committing suicide. A monster does not care whether someone is brave, poor, young, or simply desperate to earn money. Without the necessary strength and abilities, an ordinary person can be killed in an instant. That reality has created an enormous divide between those who can fight and those who cannot. The powerful become adventurers, hunters, heroes, and legends, while ordinary villagers remain behind, accepting the limitations imposed upon them from the moment their roles are determined. But then something happens that challenges everything this society believes about villagers. At the center of this extraordinary story is a certain 2-year-old child. At an age when most children are only beginning to understand the world around them, this child notices something that everyone else seems to have overlooked. The discovery begins with a simple but incredibly important realization: monsters can provide tremendous wealth when defeated. That idea sounds obvious, but within this society, it is almost revolutionary when viewed from the perspective of a villager. The strongest adventurers already understand the value of monster hunting. They risk their lives because defeating monsters can provide money, resources, experience, and opportunities for advancement. But villagers have been conditioned to believe that such a path is impossible for them. Their role is supposed to define their limits. Their destiny is supposed to be ordinary. Their lives are supposed to remain within the boundaries of farming, commerce, and community. The 2-year-old child, however, begins to question that assumption. What makes this premise so compelling is the contrast between appearance and potential. On the surface, this is just a tiny child who has been assigned the weakest possible role. There is nothing about a villager that suggests the possibility of becoming a monster hunter. Yet the child has already noticed the most important economic truth in the entire world. Monsters represent wealth. if monsters can be defeated, and if defeating them produces valuable rewards, then perhaps the real question is not whether a villager is supposed to hunt monsters, but whether the rules surrounding villagers can actually be challenged. That single realization opens the door to a much larger story about destiny, social hierarchy, ambition, and the meaning of strength. In this world, being powerful is not simply about physical ability. Society has created an entire system around the roles granted to people. Warriors and fighters are naturally associated with combat. Clerics provide support and healing. Magicians and sorcerers possess supernatural abilities. Rogues can rely on specialized talents, while hunters have skills suited to tracking and dealing with threats. Merchants have their own place within the system, connecting wealth and commerce to the broader society. These roles provide people with an established identity, and more importantly, an expected future. But above even these extraordinary roles are three special categories of people: royalty, heroes, and sages. These individuals possess extraordinary power and occupy a completely different position within the hierarchy. Their existence demonstrates just how unequal this world can be. While the majority of the population struggles to survive ordinary life, a tiny number of people possess abilities that set them apart from everyone else. They become symbols of power, prestige, and possibility. Their strength allows them to influence the world in ways ordinary people cannot. For everyone else, life is considerably simpler. Most people do not become heroes. Most people do not become sages. Most people do not possess extraordinary powers. They live at low levels, often between level 1 and 5, and spend their lives performing ordinary work. Farmers grow food. Shopkeepers sell goods. Villagers maintain towns. Families survive from one generation to the next. And that is exactly what makes the child's discovery so dangerous to the established order. If a villager can somehow find a way to benefit from monster hunting, then the boundary between the powerless and the powerful begins to disappear. The concept of levels makes this even more significant. Strength in this world is measurable. Progress can be recognized. A person can become stronger by defeating monsters and gaining experience. For adventurers, this system creates a clear path toward greater power. But for villagers, that path is effectively closed because they are not expected to fight in the first place. Their low starting position becomes a self-fulfilling limitation. They remain weak because they are never given the opportunity to become strong. The child, therefore, represents something much bigger than a potential adventurer. The child represents a challenge to the world's assumptions. What if the role of villager does not mean someone is incapable of greatness? What if being born with a weak role does not automatically mean accepting a weak life? And most importantly, what if the system itself contains opportunities that nobody bothered to investigate because society had already decided who was allowed to pursue them? These questions give the story its central sense of mystery. The audience knows that the child has noticed something important, but the full consequences of that discovery are only beginning to unfold. The idea that defeating monsters can generate enormous wealth creates a tempting possibility. Perhaps becoming stronger is not merely about personal glory. Perhaps monster hunting could completely transform the economic position of someone who was previously considered powerless. That also introduces an interesting tension between survival and ambition. A normal villager cannot simply walk outside the town and begin fighting monsters. The danger is genuine. A single mistake could mean death. So the child's discovery does not magically erase the world's dangers. Instead, it creates a problem that must be solved. If the rewards are enormous, how can someone without the proper role survive long enough to claim them? That question becomes the heart of the journey. The story also presents an intriguing examination of how society treats people according to predetermined labels. A warrior is expected to fight. A magician is expected to use magic. A merchant is expected to handle commerce. A villager is expected to remain ordinary. These assumptions may appear logical, but they can also become prisons. Once everyone accepts that a person's role determines their destiny, nobody thinks to challenge the system. The 2-year-old child is different precisely because they have not yet learned to accept those limitations. There is something almost ironic about it. The child is too young to understand all the social rules that adults have spent their entire lives accepting. Instead of looking at the world and thinking, "I am a villager, so I cannot do this," the child notices an opportunity and asks what can be done with it. That innocence may become one of the greatest advantages of all. And because the protagonist is so young, the journey carries an unusual sense of wonder. This is not the story of a seasoned warrior who has already mastered combat. It begins with someone who is barely old enough to understand the meaning of the world around them. The enormous difference between the protagonist's age and the scale of the ambition creates much of the story's charm. The child stands at the bottom of a society obsessed with levels and power. Yet instead of accepting that position, the child begins looking for a way upward. The world itself becomes another important character in the story. Towns are built and sustained by villagers, even though villagers are regarded as weak. Their work may not produce legendary battles or heroic songs, but without them civilization could not function. They are the foundation beneath the entire hierarchy. The irony is that the people considered least powerful may actually be among the most important. That makes the protagonist's potential transformation particularly meaningful. If the child succeeds, it would not simply be one person becoming stronger. It would challenge the idea that ordinary people must remain ordinary forever. At the same time, the existence of royalty, heroes, and sages ensures that the child will eventually be operating in a world where truly extraordinary individuals exist. These figures represent the highest level of power, and their presence establishes just how enormous the gap can be between an ordinary villager and someone blessed with exceptional abilities. The journey, therefore, is not simply about becoming rich. Wealth is the first discovery, but behind that discovery lies something far more important: freedom. Money can provide access to resources. Resources can create opportunities. Opportunities can lead to strength. Strength can create independence. And independence allows someone to escape the destiny society has assigned to them. That chain of possibilities is what makes the concept so exciting. The protagonist has been given the role of villager, but perhaps a role is only the beginning of a person's story rather than the ending. Perhaps the most important ability is not the power granted at birth, but the ability to recognize an opportunity and pursue it when everyone else says it is impossible. Of course, the world is not going to make this easy. Monsters remain dangerous. Levels still matter. The 8 recognized roles still exist. The hierarchy between ordinary people and extraordinary individuals remains deeply established. And a 2-year-old child attempting to enter a world designed for trained monster hunters faces obstacles that would challenge even an experienced adventurer. But that is exactly why the premise works. The story takes one of the weakest positions imaginable and asks what happens when the person occupying that position refuses to accept its limitations. Instead of beginning with a powerful hero who already has everything necessary to succeed, it begins with someone who appears to have nothing. A child. A villager. Level almost irrelevant. And yet, that child has discovered something that could change everything. Defeating monsters means wealth. Wealth means opportunity. And opportunity means that perhaps the weakest person in the world can begin climbing toward a future nobody expected. What starts as a simple observation could eventually become a revolution in how this world understands strength, social status, and destiny. The most fascinating part is not knowing exactly how far the child can go, but watching the walls of the old system begin to crack as soon as someone finally questions them. In a world where God decides your role, society decides your place, and levels appear to determine your strength, the most dangerous thing may not be a monster at all. It may be an ordinary person who realizes that the rules everyone follows are not necessarily the rules that must be followed. And that is what makes the story of this 2-year-old villager so intriguing. The protagonist does not begin as a chosen hero, a legendary warrior, or a powerful sage. The protagonist begins as someone the world has already decided is insignificant, but with one simple discovery about the value of defeating monsters, that predetermined future suddenly looks much less certain. The adventure ahead promises to be a journey of growth, wealth, danger, and ambition. But above all, it is a story about challenging the limits placed upon you. Because sometimes the person everyone overlooks is the person capable of discovering the opportunity that everyone else was too afraid, too comfortable, or too conditioned to see. And in this world, where even the weakest villagers are told to stay in their place, one extraordinary 2-year-old may be about to prove that destiny is not always as permanent as everyone believes.